Tune into the truth frequency.
Your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Welcome everyone, this is Phoenix. Hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you had a good weekend. Here it is. This is Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. Oh yeah. I'm supposed to be joined on the line this evening by Ney Sey, but for some reason we can't reach him. We've been trying to reach him through the switchboard here. We'll give it one more time. We've tried numerous times, and if we cannot reach him, we will not be able to have him on tonight. Ney Sey, are you there?
Wow is all I can say right now.
Okay.
My entire history of me and yours chat disappeared, and it wouldn't let me accept it, and I had to try a couple fandangled things, but I apologize. This is the third or fourth. Nope, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, either way. It's technical issues. Man, that's the thing about our society and the way we are. Man, everything is so interconnected by the wires. We talk about this all the time, and you've heard me joke about this. Our listeners have that. And, it's not really that funny, but I say someday, somewhere, somebody's going to trip over an extension cord, and we're all going to die. And that's jokingly, but it's become that. It literally has. It's, a failure in a nuclear plant or at a power plant or, God forbid, in the cockpit of an airplane can actually lead to that type of ending. And it's all because we're so dependent upon technology. Plugged in, man. Everybody is plugged in. Speaking of plugged in, how are things going and how are things happening out there on the reservation?
Well, as some of you may know, my youngest had her 10th golden birth recognition party this last weekend, and I had 12 between the ages of 8 and 10-year-olds. And we had a 50-box maze, refrigerator and stove boxes we had set up in the backyard. And it was the representation of the basement of Disney and the basement of Warner Brothers Studios. And our theme was Death of Disney ?
Dude, that is interesting. It's fascinating and creepy all at once. Number one, the first question I have is, where the heck did you get 50 or 100 refrigerator and and range boxes. What the heck is that? You go raid a homeless camp or something? What's up, man?
We've been
Get that many.
Yeah, we've been collecting them for like the last 3.5 weeks. We've been doing this for the last 6 years.
Where do you
And-
collect them at? Dude, where do you keep all those boxes at?
Well, strangely enough, when you go and talk to these appliance centers and you tell them what they're doing, they all recognize me now over the last 6 years. And so they even start setting them aside for us. And so, it's the easiest and cheapest way to give children such enjoyment. You just take those, those really cheap lathe or marker stakes that people do for underground lines and stuff.
Yeah.
You pound them into the ground, you take a heavy duty staple gun, and you go inside the box and you staple it to the stake, and that keeps it standing up. And then you just add, and then you just go through with the box cutter or a terrorist weapon, whatever you choose to call it, and you just cut doors. And then you make secret passages with sliding doors and like doggy doors, and it's a blast.
Well, sounds like that's really neat. It sounds like your daughter had a really good time. That's neat. I'm glad. That's good news. There's so much that we can look at that's good in the world. And we as a people have such a tendency to look at the negative. And there's so much going on in today's world and what we're seeing today. It's crazy. Big topic tonight that we're going to be talking about, everyone, is exactly that, the big topics, the current events and everything that's going on. Before I get into some of my faves and some of the things I want to point out to everyone, especially this week, stick around because I'm going to give a heads up on something here. What do you see that's going on that has really kind of piqued your interest there, Ney Sey?
Well, in today's little encounter over the news, and I do take a few 10, 15 minutes and I go through the headlines, and if something grabs me, I'll jump on it. But my ending feeling is, as per usual, according to Mockingbird, that it's manipulation and distraction. But the one that I found super interesting is, I believe it was the New York Times, that they released over the last many days of Trump in office over 1,000 untruths that he has shared. And as you go through all of these untruths, it's it's like the wow. When I first joined you, it's just wow. And it's just beyond my imagine. By the time you get through what he's tweeted to the time you go to check in a couple hours, you're just amazed of what else can he do? What else is he going to tweet that just makes us say, wow?
Well, see, here's the question, dude. You're talking about the New York Times that has notoriously been known as fake news. And the question I have is, out of all of those alleged falsehoods, how much of those in themselves are falsehoods? Because they've had some serious things they've come out with, and none of it was true.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree. And this is, I used to call it the 80-20 rule, where they would give us 80% truth and sprinkle it with 20% of BS, and it would make all of it BS. Or vice versa, they would give us 80% BS and 20% truth, and we would think it's all truth. But now I call it the 3/3 effect, that it's either 2/3 the truth and 1/3 BS, because we become I almost said the S word. We don't say this word in my house, stupid. And I almost said we have become stupid. But I do believe it has been by design. We've become complacent. We've become so overwhelmed with the next cycle. And the easiest way to disrupt a cycle is to add another news cycle.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of them, and they're coming. And just to point out to everyone, when Ney Sey was talking about Mockingbird. Some of our listeners may not be familiar. You're talking about the CIA operation called Operation Mockingbird, which actually was started by Dulles, Alan Dulles, who was the CIA director back in the 50s. And it was a media network operation that the CIA was started with, I believe it's like 25, 26 newspapers and different wire agencies. And it grew. It grew to include all of them, all the majors. And that was incorporated also through the aid of the Council on Foreign Relations, et cetera, that, you know, is the membership is also all the major media people. And so Operation Mockingbird, where the narrative that they wanted you to believe was put out, and it was put out through multiple venues. So no matter, you know, what your flavor of news was, you would pick it up and run with it. And that's very factual. Now, not only that, but just recently they reauthorized the use of propaganda for American media. That was done during the last Obama term, but it was not overturned by Trump. And so it continues on. Now, this media cycle you're talking about changing, this is about to go hyperactive, dude. We're going to talk about some of the big things happening with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks. He put out a dead man switch on yesterday. And what that is, if you don't know what that refers to, a dead man switch is a set of codes that people who have access to files can use to unlock information. And he has done this in the past successfully, and he has one going right now. And the one he has going right now, I believe the actual data dump is going to be on the 21st of this month, which is this Saturday. And he's going to wait till the 21st because he's giving Mueller, who's the current FBI special counsel, I guess, who's doing an investigation, to come clean on some stuff. And they're saying what Assange has is the information that last year at this time he threatened to release. And he said he had information that when he released it, it would be proof of treason. Treason.
What's the phase of the moon, Phoenix?
It's going to be a new moon. We're going to talk about that. Hold on, I'm building up to that, Ney Sey. Just hang in there. This is
sorry.
Oh, no problem. But he is threatening to drop this information if something doesn't come out. Now, they're saying it has to do with Hillary Clinton, the Russians, Russian collusion, Uranium One deal. If you're not familiar with that, we'll talk a little bit about it. But basically what it is was the FBI determined and found out that in 2009, the Russian government was attempting to bribe members of the U.S. government into colluding with them to sell them large holdings of uranium that the United States strategically has. And it appears that actually went through, and Julian Assange is going to drop proof of this and all the data on this, that Hillary Clinton, who was then the Secretary of State of the United States, colluded with Russia and accepted millions of dollars of monies from certain Russian interests that went into the Clinton Foundation, the classic pay to play, and they sold off a very, very large percentage, like 1/3 of the holdings of our strategic uranium to Russia. And he's going to drop this information plus more. There's even more information on this that he's going to put out on different things that, from what I understand, could prove treason and high crimes against a lot of high-level former members and some sitting members of the U.S. government. Now, if that isn't enough, we had today North Korea, the United States and South Korea have launched a military operation on the Korean Peninsula. And what they have done is they have started, as of today, with some Navy exercises, and they'll also be doing air exercises. And it involves the U.S. 7th Fleet aircraft carrier, USS Ronald Reagan, and two destroyers, the USS Steinem and the USS Mustin, and an entire carrier strike group. And they're training with South Korean warships and other defense assets. and Aegis ships, Orions, anti-submarine aircraft, etc., in the East Sea. But also, they actually put this out, and this is prodding Kim Jong-un of North Korea, a unit of U.S. Special Forces tasked with carrying out decapitation operations, which is assassination, is aboard a nuclear-powered submarine in the group, according to a defense source. Among other assets mobilized are F-15Ks, FA-18s, A-10 fighter jets. Those are land-based, by the way. I guess you can use them on carriers, as well as AH-64E Apaches, Lynx, and AW-159 Wildcat naval choppers. They have also deployed.
Did you say AWACS?
No, they didn't launch an AWACS. They put out a U.S. has also deployed a joint surveillance target attack radar system. It's just Daystar.
Better. Yeah.
Closely monitor the North Grounds naval forces. Now, all right, let me get into this. This exercise is running from today, the 17th, and will conclude on the 21st. Right? And what we have, we have a new moon coming up on this Thursday, the 19th. It'll be exact at 3:12 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, this isn't your standard new moon, Ney Sey, and everybody else. There's something interesting about this new moon. The fact that it's in October is a big one, but also we have an opposition of Uranus, okay, with this new moon. And this is interesting because when you have Uranus in opposition to the moon, and because the forces of Uranus, that can give you surprises, shocks, fast-moving experiences, sudden changes. I mean, this is the exact type of energetic that the archonic forces of the powers that be would use to launch a shocking attack. Now, there's a reason for all this. This is all theatrics. This is what I call the game board. Ney Sey, you know this very well, and we'll talk about this with everybody. But with all these critical things coming up, with all this threatening to dump this damning information on high level current and former U.S. people, politicians, and also the problem we have with our economy. And some people say, Phoenix, what are you talking about? It's like hit 23,000 today on the Dow. It's a record. Oh, yeah. It's pumped up there big time, baby. But the real problem is what happened over 100 years ago at Jekyll Island with the Federal Reserve and our entire fiat money system, which is about to be overtaken by the Chinese yuan, which is backed by gold and oil. The petrodollar system is dead. It is over. But they just can't come out and tell everybody, hey, guess what? You know your 401ks and your savings and everything you work for? Guess what? It's no longer worth anything. It has lost 50% of the value. And we had to do this because it was a total Ponzi scheme and we are $21 trillion in debt. So they can't do that. And they're not going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to go into a theatrical situation where it appears that there's been a possible major military attack or incident, and that will be the excuse used to drop the confidence of the U.S. dollar, and that way they can basically kill the petrodollar, and they will replace it with something else. This won't be permanent, but they'll kill the petrodollar, throw everyone into shock, and it won't be anybody's fault except that mean old nasty Kim Jong-un. That crazy Korean did this. It wasn't us. It wasn't Congress. It wasn't Senate. It wasn't the bankers. It wasn't Wall Street. Oh, no. It was some crazy Korean guy. Yeah, that's a ticket. That's what happened. And that's what we're looking at, people.
You know, when you take a plate, excuse me, or a coin and you spin it on your table, and it starts doing that, and then pop. I think we're at that point in that critical wobble. And depending on where we are within ourselves, without fear, within love, when that pop goes, just like on the Matrix, when Neo was in that false matrix training room of all white, and he said, "Get me out of here! Get me out of here!" And they brought him out, and they said, "He's going to pop." So this is a great time for meditation and relaxing and collecting yourself with everything that's going on.
Yes, it is. And that's the whole purpose of tonight's program. You know, we are seeing some pretty crazy things coming up right now. And I just wanted to give everybody the heads up that there's a high degree of probability of acting out and some really serious things to hit you. And you're not going to really see a lot about it. And one of the troubling aspects of all this, they're not talking about it. They're talking about everything other than what's happening right now in North Korea. They've hinted at it. They've, alluded to it. They give people just enough information to know that's a possibly critical situation. So when it does happen, everyone will have the backstory. Now, when you see this happen, if indeed this plays out like this, I'm not saying it will, but the probabilities are there. If not this week, sometime in the near future, do not panic. You want to make sure your preps are good and things are good. But basically what you're really seeing, the true backstory to all of this is the United States dollar, the petrodollar system is over. We have been reporting this on Going Global East Meets West for a long time. Lake actually pulled articles up the other day she had posted in 2009 all about this and how this lead up and these currency swaps that's been going on all over the world. And this is all coming to a head right now. ISIS is almost defeated in Syria, and in Raqqa, they have defeated ISIS there. We saw the Kurds, and we'll talk about this more in the coming segment after the bottom of the hour, the Kurdish situation in Iraq. Because a lot of people are like, what the heck's going on here and what's this mean? We'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically what we're seeing is the petrodollar system is over. It's being replaced by the Chinese yuan. That'll be the premier currency for the use of trading of oil and gold globally. And this isn't anything new, and this isn't something just off the cuff. This has been in the works and planned for a long time. And we've talked about it over the years, and I want everyone to be aware of this. If you see a major economic downturn that happens because of a very visible military incident. I'm going to leave it at that. A very visible military incident that they can blame it on. So it's not Congress. It's not Senate. It's not even Trump. It's no one. It wasn't Obama. It wasn't Bush. Oh, no, it was this evil Korean guy. Okay, if it wasn't for him, everything would be wonderful. If you see that and things look very troubling, don't be troubled. And that's the big message for tonight. We'll talk more about this. Don't be troubled, because there's a plan in all of this, and you're basically watching theatrics on a grand scale. But unfortunately, some theatrics are bloody theatrics. Case in point, bullfighting. It's a very theatrical thing, but it results in the death of animals and sometimes humans. But it is theatrics. And a theatrical presentation, a bloody one, but nonetheless. And this is what we potentially see on a grand scale with some of these military operations. It's going to be controlled chaos, if you will. You think that's a good word, Ney Sey, controlled chaos?
A word that has been used time and time again for what they do, time and time again.
Time and time again, yeah, and I think that time is coming up. And how about that? What do you think, Ney Sey? October. How's the timing on this?
Oh, it's beautiful. The synchronicities are always there. And, you can go and find the podcasts for the IMF, and you can basically follow their game plan with what you're talking about, Phoenix. Especially when you start seeing the whole gold in the IMF where it's being thrown here and there. And you can just see how they're setting up the pieces.
Oh, yeah. They had to do it. They've built a new financial house, And that financial house, based in the East, not the West anymore, and it's a shift of power. And they had to do this. I've described it this way before, Ney Sey, that if you have a structure and it's condemned, man, it's just like you can't fix it anymore. It's not stable. They condemn it. Well, before you tear it down, especially if you're working out there, you need another structure. So what you do is you build up another structure, another house, another office or whatever. And once it's all set and the infrastructure is there, you move everything over into it and then you pull it, you take down the other one. And once the other one falls, you are securely already in your next operational area. And that's what they've done, people, with the BRICS banking system, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the ASEAN markets, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the huge projects that China has up and coming. We'll talk about all this, but that's the new house that things are going into. But it is not all doom and gloom if you know what's happening. And keep listening, you'll find out what is about to happen because it's coming down right now. Now, we're rolling up on a break here in just a moment. And when we come back, we'll get into these and a few other things. There's a couple other topics I want to bring up that are happening right now. There's so much happening in the world, and we'll address as much of this as we can when we come back from the break.
Do not touch that dial.
Really good.
That goes out to Johnny. Johnny whistles.
He's probably asleep already. It's late over there, Scotland. Oh, man.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
I'm coming back with you all here on Phoenix Rising. I'm hoping I'm not muted. I've just realized that things are different than what they seem, but maybe not on tonight's show. Are we still here, Phoenix?
We're still here.
Okay, good.
You're not muted, and you were not muted during the music coming in, but that's okay too. Yeah, I'll cut you some slack, man, because you're blind. That's the only... I can't imagine. Some of our listeners, if you don't know, you probably do, but Ney Sey, Native American, he's also blind because of problems, Gulf War illness, and a few other things. It makes things difficult, to say the least. And, I'm not making light of it, but of course, but you can't see light. Huh? No, I'm kidding. But it's got to be hard, man. I can't imagine, operating in the dark 24/7. It must be really difficult, dude.
Well, it's that whole thing of what's your other choice? Either what is that? If you're going through hell, just keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. Don't stop. I have to ask you though, do you have like other superhuman abilities? Like, do you have like the smell of like, of a wild animal? Can you smell like prey in the distance?
Well, no, I usually smell like a wild animal after I go to one of my outdoor festivals over the weekend. But I do have a very keen nose. And just an example, I had a couple friends over, and we're all talking in the living room, music's going and stuff. And then I said to my buddy, I'm like, can you go and check the bathtub? And he's like, what? I said, the bathtub's leaking. And he said to me, whatever. And he goes into the bathtub and he just started laughing. And he comes out and he's like, "How did you hear that?" And it's just, I just heard it. And when I did join the Navy, they were trying to entice me already to go into sonar because I was blowing them away with the hearing test.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. So you naturally had that. I heard a cool thing the other day. A guy was talking. He was a wilderness guy. He said when a leaf falls in the woods, an eagle sees it, a deer hears it, and a bear smells it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Anyway, yeah. Getting back to the topic, smelling and hearing news and seeing what's going on. I was telling everyone before we went to break, I'd address the situation that's happening in the Middle East. Raqqa has been freed, by the way.
Oh, Phoenix? One quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to go back when you were talking about Uranus, and you were talking about the moon and how we're going to be having the new moon and everything like that. Yes. And you're talking about this feeling of like little bouts of expediency, or like when all of a sudden like quick time and stuff like that. And if you look at the grander perspective of it, and you look at the positioning of the sun and the earth and the moon and where Uranus is right now, that the moon is on the opposite side of us, and so the earth is occulting the moon. So that's adding to that greater electromagnetic, the tribute of field modality and the whole directional pull on each other. Mm-hmm. And so this is going to counteract the spin of the earth, where it just might give the earth a little, like on the merry-go-round, when the merry-go-round is going around, and every now and then a kid will go in there and give it a little extra oomph. And this is what happens to these planets and these celestial bodies when they interact, just like we interact with each other electromagnetically.
Yeah, exactly. That's all goes in with the electric universe theory of McCaney and all that, which I am a great believer of. I'd come to that conclusion myself long before I'd even heard him, that it was all electric. But, the power of the planets, and occasionally we'll have people who are real strong Christian belief, and they're like, that's like astrology. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it sure is. And you know what? The way we see it and the way I understand it and know it to be is that the stars and the planets were made by God, and they were placed there, and it's like the most precise, grandest timepiece. It's the finest Swiss watchmakers only dream of having a timepiece like the heavens. And there were wise men of old who saw this many centuries ago and put this all together, and it's a learned science. And they observed this movement of the stars and the planets in the skies, and they have correlated this with human emotions and events. And that's not ooga booga. That's just historical replication and observation. A lot of people who are, what would I say, very conservative, evangelical type people. When you talk to them about astrology, they get extremely defensive, like, oh, that's, bad. But they totally forget about the fact that when the Messiah was born, Christ, the only one that recognized his birth were astrologers, the Magi of the East, who came because they read the stars, are like, hey, a king has been born, and let's see. They saw the positioning, and it's like, he's been born in Jerusalem, let's go. And so it was like a 2-year journey or whatever for them. They did this to come and honor this king because they recognized it in the stars. And the astrologers themselves are the ones who pointed out, and not only did they come and honor him, if it wasn't for their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh that they gave to Christ's family, Mary and Joseph, Christ would have died, because Herod was a crazy guy, and he was like the ultimate, tyrannical ruler, and he found out that there was a king was born, and he ordered all male children 2 years or younger to be killed, and which they were. They went through, they purged all male children. It was a massacre ordered by the king. But the only reason that Christ himself was not massacred and killed is because astrologers recognized who he was, came there, and gave his family wealth so his family could flee and be safe. So people say, oh, I don't believe in astrology because, I believe in Jesus. Well, dig this. Jesus was recognized by astrologers, and if it wasn't for the astrologers bringing him gold, he would have been killed by Herod when he was 2 years old. Just a little point I want to point out to everybody, because this is true. These energetics that we observe by these planets and stars made by God, are very observable. They're recorded, and some astrology is just like nonsense. You have astrologers out there that are just like, there are very few that are good. We've vetted a lot of them here at Phoenix Rising Radio, gone through a lot, and we only listen to the best. Laura Walker of the Oracle Report, case in point. If you're not familiar with that, go to oraclereport.com. She's an occasional guest on Phoenix Rising Radio, and she does a daily report. And I'm sure she'll be addressing the very things Ney Sey and I are talking about this evening, because this is a big energetic. And, we have this very interesting thing with Uranus, Ney Sey, and that brings out the potential of surprises, shocks, and fast-moving events. And with what we see with North Korea, South Korea, and the United States right now, and all these threats and all this stuff with Julian Assange coming to a head, dude, they could not have planned this better. And they used this. That's the thing. Speaking of the Oracle Report, Laura Walker has told us when she's been a guest on before, and if you read her stuff about the archonic forces and how the powers that be used this to their advantage. And they use these energies like a catapult, like you were saying, Ney Sey, like this energetic catapult to launch things. And it's not working anymore because people are wise to it. But, that's why I wanted to bring this up tonight, and people need to be aware of this, because there is a potential for some shocking surprises this very week.
Yeah, and then if we go back to the other news stories, part of the distraction, and forgive me again, you were bringing up the Middle East before we kind of went a little off reservation there.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm glad we did, because we really needed to emphasize that in these energetics here. And there's a whole reason behind this. This is such a complex subject. It's such a big subject. We're talking this evening, we're talking about major global economics. We're talking about systems that were set up, initially the Federal Reserve System over 100 years ago here in the United States. And the United States dollar at one point became the world reserve currency, and which was backed by gold. There was a time, and some of our listeners are aware of this and have seen this, whenever you pulled out a U.S. dollar and it said, redeemable in silver or gold, you could redeem in silver or gold. And that system under Richard Nixon was stopped. And the reason for that was because France came in and wanted their gold. And why would France want their gold? Well, during World War II, when things were extremely unstable in Europe, we know what was going on there. The United States told nations of Europe, you know what, if things are very risky right now, give us all of your gold and we will protect it for you in the United States and return it to you after the war. And they did it. And looking at it, it was probably a smart thing to do because, Hitler's armies were rolling through nations and laying them to waste. And you ended up with these nations all over the world shipping tons and tons of gold, literally by ships, over to the United States. for alleged safekeeping. And the government of Germany did it. Well, the U.S. took Germany's gold and told Germany that the new Germany they'd hold it for them. But a lot of that gold's gone missing. And what happened was France, during Richard Nixon's tenure as president of the United States, said, you know what, we want our gold back. And Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. Boom. He made an announcement one evening. And the reason, we didn't have France's gold to give it back to him, just like we don't have Germany's gold to give back to him, and a lot of gold because it's been squandered. And what happened was, to protect the U.S. dollar after that debacle, Henry Kissinger went out and he brokered a plan called the petrodollar system. And he basically, what he did was he went to Saudi Arabia, and this is why we're going to talk about the Middle East in a moment. He went to Saudi Arabia and said, hey, listen, kings of Saudi Arabia, we will make you a deal. We will give you weapons. We will give you protection. We will put military bases there. We'll make you the strongest nation in the Middle East if you do this for us. You have all this oil, and we ask that you would only sell your oil for U.S. dollars. And he went around to multiple, which is basically the start of OPEC, nations in the Middle East, and got this deal. And they're like, okay, you're going to give us weapons, airplanes, and protection if we do this? And the U.S. said yes. And so these Middle Eastern nations signed this deal, and all of a sudden, anywhere you were in the world, if you wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia or any of the big oil producers, you could only pay for it in U.S. dollars. So all of a sudden, the U.S. dollar that was no longer backed by gold and was potentially worthless, all of a sudden had a value. It was called petrodollar. So because if you say Russia wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they're like, okay, we want to buy, a boatload of oil. And Saudi Arabia say, well, that will be, $50 million. Well, they couldn't pay with rubles. They would have to take the rubles, go to the U.S., get U.S. dollars, and take those U.S. dollars and then buy the oil. And so there was a constant demand for U.S. dollars, the petrodollar system. And that's why we've been in war in the Middle East and doing all these things for a long time, because we've been protecting the petrodollar system. But now that game is up. That jig is up. No, one of the reasons I think, Ney Sey, is because, man, petroleum and petroleum products are like the whale oil was at one point. It's run its course. I mean, we're running around in automobiles that use internal combustion engines that are driven off of gasoline made from petroleum. Dude, that's the exact same thing that Henry Ford was driving around over 100 years ago. It hadn't changed.
Well, just take a look at Russia and where they've ran with Tesla technology. Russia, when it comes, you'll be amazed with these engineers in Russia and how incredible. And it's really hard to find some of these videos that I listen to, YouTube videos, where they're translated, and these Russian scientists and the stuff that they're figuring out. So it's literally like as you say, the death of the petro. And that is going to be, was it by design? Possibly. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever, because in order to initiate the new world order, they would need America to be able to step in line. And right now we're just not willing. But the sad part is unfortunately these little boys in Washington disease, they're the kind of kids that have tantrums and kick over the board. Yeah, well, the game board, that's an analogy I use all the time, kicking over of the game board. It's going to happen, and it's going to be a big distraction. They're going to do this. For some of our listeners who have listened for years, we posted over at Going Global East Meets West. You can find that at goingglobalEastMeetsWest.blogspot.com. And Lake's been doing research for years, and Tim Geithner, back when he was involved with the Treasury, did an interview in China. This was around the Chinese Olympic time, I guess around 2008 or so. He was over there, and he had been in China before in an official capacity before he became involved with the Treasury.
and he was doing interviews talking about the emergence of the Chinese yuan in the global economy and what it was going to do, and the Asian economies that were rising. And mind you, this was before the BRICS were announced, the BRICS Bank and all of this, and the ASEAN and these big economic structures that are in place right now. This is before this was all come into play. And he was, talking very optimistically about the Chinese yuan and the future of Asian banking. And the interviewer, and keep in mind, this interview was done in Beijing. It was done in English, but it was in Beijing. And I think Tim Geithner didn't think it was actually going to be seen in the United States. And the guy asked him, he said, well, what about the US dollar? And Tim Geithner said, without hesitation or stuttering, he just quickly said, he goes, we're going to kill it. And he was looking at the guy, looked at him right in the eye. He goes, we're going to kill it. And the guy looked at him and paused, and they just went on to more conversation. And we're like, okay, there's a plan, baby. They're going to kill the dollar. We knew this. We knew it was in the works, but they've been talking about it. Joseph Stiglitz, we used to call him the man behind the curtain. Ney Sey he was he was a head economist, one of the head economists at the IMF for many years, of the International Monetary Fund. He worked for the World Bank, but he ended up being the chairperson of the Economic Committee for the G20. And basically, the G20 Economic Committee was the advisory committee for all the G20 nations. And Stiglitz was in charge of this, right? And they were basically setting the economic principle and everything for the G20. And he was going around, oh my God, I can't remember. I think it was like 5 years ago, doing talks in Europe, telling everyone the dollar's dead. The age of the petrodollar is over. It's going to be replaced, blah, blah, blah. And all the Europeans heard it. People knew it, but Americans don't know it. And as a matter of fact, Captain Keith Plassick, who has been on Phoenix Rising Radio before, I don't know if you ever heard any of his interviews. Ney Sey he was the first private contractor into Iraq after the Iraqi War. Fascinating story. Anyway, he's a ship captain. He's down in Peru, and I think he goes in between Peru and Brazil right now. But when he was in Peru, living in Peru, he called me up one time. He goes, dude, you won't believe this. I'm like, what? He goes, the Peruvian government has been putting out, like public service announcements to all the people to begin getting out of all your American dollar holdings and switch to Peruvian currency, because the value of the American dollar is going to be greatly reduced in the future. And I mean, he said it was like on TV commercials and everybody was talking about it. And it wasn't like a panic thing. They were just telling people, you need to do this, you need to do this. And what it was in preparation of what we're about to see, where the U.S. dollar is no longer the primary reserve currency, and we're going to be replaced by something else. More than likely, the Chinese yuan, or possibly a basket of currencies. I mean, we're still going to be there, and I don't want people to freak out, but this is what's happening. I just want to kind of give people some education on what we're about to see unfold, because it's happening right now.
Well, it's never a bad idea to have a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver, whether, just a couple half ounces, quarter ounces, what you can get, because it will be a lot easier to bargain or barter or trade with that than it will be that paper money. And then you'd be surprised, with the going to the Chinese with the monetary value, how long we have been partners in one form or another with the Chinese since the creation of the United States. Oh yeah, true. And that's something just recently that I've been looking up, is the history between China and America's relationship. And we and China were working together to try to stop the empire movement of the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was, the United Kingdom launched the Opium Wars and all that against China. Fascinating thing, since you've been studying this, and you're Native American too, is kind of a little closer to your history. When the United States, when people in the United States were building the great railways, and they were linking the transcontinental railway from the east to the west, and they were making these grand efforts to industrialize all of North America. On the eastern side, the railways were being built by the Irish. You had English people who were overseeing the railroads being built, with Irish immigrants primarily and Scottish swinging the hammers, and some African Americans. But on the other side, you had Native Americans and Chinese that were building the railroads. And you had a lot of Chinese workers, immigrants, that had come in on the West Coast that were working on the railroads. Dude, the new plan for the Belt and Road project that the Chinese are launching, and we're going to talk a little bit when we come back from the next break about what they're doing in China right now. A huge thing going on about all this. Anyway, they have plans of putting these high-speed railways in all over Europe and the United States. So the Chinese are once again, and Xi, the president of China, is friends with Trump. The Chinese are going to be building railroads, but this time they're going to be in charge. And there's going to be other people swinging away at the labor, but they're going to build the high-speed railways and redo the American railways once again. How's that for historical replication?
Well, absolutely, because if you look at it just like with the whole building of the Hoover Dam and all of this stuff, when we go into such a collapse and we go into starvation and the collapse of the 20s, people are going to need something to get themselves out of there. And then what if all of a sudden these free labor camps start opening up all over because we need people to build these grand railways?
Oh, yeah. Railways, roads, all of this. I mean, it's basically going to rebuild America because the infrastructure is like failing and it has to be done. Let's see. Maybe we can come up with a name for it. Let's see. Let me think. Oh, I know. Make America Great Again. Dude, this is a setup. This is in the plans. I mean, none of this is random. Trump, why do you think they have Trump as president right now? Because he was a CEO. He's a construction guy. And he's been through bankruptcies himself. And he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy from New York. They needed to put him in place of all of this reconstruction that's going to happen. But it's not going to come without some bumps, because again, they just can't tell everybody, hey, guess what? You've all been scammed and we have to devalue everything. They've got to come up with a story that's believable for everybody. It's highly dramatic and it places the blame far away from the shores of the United States. And that's what we're about to see. But the outcome, isn't all bad. It really isn't. Anyway. Well,
may we hope it's not all bad. Hope.
That's true, because, I mean, just best laid plans. We'll see how this all works and see what they can come up with. But anyway, we'll roll up on a break here again, and we'll come back and talk about more of this. I didn't get to talk about the Middle East, but I will when we come back from the break, because there's a lot of stuff going on geopolitically all around the world that's affecting us, even if we don't see it every day. This will affect us. And it's all part of the change of power, east meets west, the swing of power. And it's not a bad thing. It's a cyclical thing. It happens. Anyway.
And one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to make the creator laugh, tell him your plans.
Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news. Wherever you are, make it Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast.
And welcome back to the second hour of Phoenix Rising Radio, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, where truth is premier. Are you a supporter of the truth? Do you believe in the truth? Do you want to have access, high definition, downloadable access to not only Phoenix Rising Radio, all of our episodes, but all the other great and wonderful hosts right here on TFR? If so, if you would like this, go over to the Phoenix Rising Radio listener page at truthfrequencyradio.com and see how you can become a supporter to help to support the truth and free speech right here. And don't forget, you can listen to TFR on iHeartRadio, on all your devices, on your television, if you have iHeartRadio. I know DirecTV has it, and TuneIn and other apps. Be sure and check it out. Anyway, we were talking before the break about the entire global situation, Ney Sey, and everything happening. And I did tell everyone I'd get into some of the Middle Eastern things. And basically what we're seeing is there was a last-ditch effort of the U.S. to hang on to the petrodollar system. Now, this isn't just very recent. This entire effort surrounded the Iraqi wars, okay, and the entire process of that. Because what happened was Saddam Hussein, when he was alive, he was actually friends with the United States. And that was one of the problems during the first Gulf War, was all the armament they had was U.S., and we didn't have counters for our own stuff, which was kind of a sticky wicket to deal with there. But he was an asset of the United States and considered a friend of the United States. There are pictures of United States congressmen and senators, having dinner with Saddam Hussein. And everyone's like, well, how can that be and what happened? Well, what happened was they were using Iraq to, go against Iran. But Iraq decided that they wanted to no longer sell oil. Saddam Hussein said, you know what, I'm going to sell oil in euros only. And yeah, that's basically the end of Saddam Hussein. That decision ended up with him swinging from a rope. And the situation we have in Iraq today. Then we had Syria, the Syrian situation. That was, why are we in Syria? The whole thing with Syria, Syria was a beautiful country. Syria was an ally of the United States, okay? Assad, the leader of Syria, the current leader of Syria, elected by the Syrian people, overwhelmingly the people of Syria love him, contrary to what you would, hear on the Mockingbird media. He also, John Kerry in particular, John Kerry and John Kerry's wife, John Kerry used to call him my dear friend Assad. They were friends. Assad's wife and Kerry's wife were friends, and they would get together. That's when they were allies. And what happened was the United States, with the petrodollar system, wanted to put a pipeline in, the Caspian Sea pipeline that would run across Syria. And it was what was that, Ney Sey? Did you drop something?
I hit my water bottle. I'm sorry.
That's all right. As long as your water bottle didn't hit you. Anyway, back to the point. They wanted to put this pipeline across Syria. And it was a joint project with Saudi Arabia and the United States. And it would have meant billions of dollars for the U.S. Petrodollar system. And Assad is not a dictator, no matter what they would tell you. He's a president of Syria, and he couldn't just okay it. It had to go to the Syrian parliament for vote, just like here in the United States. and someone would have to go to a vote, and the Syrian government would not approve it. No matter what kind of deals the U.S. offered or anything, like we'll do this, we'll do that, they wouldn't do it. And so it came, because it was all about money, because that's what all the wars are, they're banker wars. All of a sudden, Assad went from being the premier leader of the Middle East. As a matter of fact, Barbara Walters and other people interviewed him. He was he was considered like the ideal leader of the Middle East. Educated man, he's a doctor, I believe. He's intelligent, he's kind, his people loved him. He went from being that, an ally of the United States, to the evil, mad dictator, Assad. And they did that so they could, justify taking him out and his government. Why? Because he's a bad guy? No, he's not a bad guy. Why did they do this? For money. Because they wanted this pipeline to go across Syria. And that's the whole reason. Now, where did ISIS come from? ISIS was developed by Saudi Arabia, the United States, possibly Israel too, to be this revolutionary fighting force of international people who went in to destabilize the government of Syria. And they thought they were going to defeat them and take over and get their pipeline. And they thought they were going to do the same in Iraq, but it didn't work out. And these guys are being beat. And the reason it didn't work out is because of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, 2 years ago, I believe it was, stood up at the United Nations and he gave a famous speech. He said, "Do you realize what you have done to the world?" Because when ISIS came rolling across the desert, Ney Sey, they came rolling out of the desert, into Iraq, and they had these brand new Toyota trucks, hundreds of them, and these brand new black uniforms and these snappy black flags. And curiously, they were all carrying M4s with M203 grenade launchers on them and all this, all this American armament. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they came in, people like, who are these people? Oh, these are rebels who are rising up. BS. There's a paid mercenary force to destabilize the Middle East to try to keep the hold of the U.S. petrodollar. But guess what? It didn't work. That was their last ditch effort, because they had to do that because they couldn't go directly to war with Russia or China. Very, very, very risky thing to do. And so they tried to destabilize the situation in the Middle East and overturn the apple cart, if you will, and take the power away from an emerging Russia and China and all these. But, in the news right now, I'm looking at this, Islamic State group has now lost its last stronghold in Raqqa. This is in Syria, once the de facto capital of its so-called caliphate. And this is breaking news this evening. In the final battle for the stadium complex and hospital, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces says it killed 22 ISIS fighters. The U.S. coalition supporting the SDF with critical airstrikes says it can only confirm 90% of the city is under their control. Raqqa Town Square was once a scene of ISIS military parades, public executions, and beheadings, and those days are gone. Anyway, that's the story out of the U.S. You have the Russian version of this and the Syrian version, because they were all been fighting ISIS. But long story short, this huge manufactured mercenary army got their butts kicked. That's the basic way to say it, and it's over.
Well, isn't that common in history that we can't leave no evidence behind, and then it's the dramatic climax when all of a sudden you find out that the bad guy kills all of his submen, all of his little lackeys get all knocked off,
Yeah, kind of like Hitler's bunker, right?
Yes.
Was killed. He committed suicide. Where's the bunker? It's gone. It burned. It blew up. Whatever. Yeah. Meanwhile, in Argentina, no, but it's so true. That's exactly what they do, and we've seen evidence of this over and over and over. And they've got to scrub this up because, man, it's a mess. It is a serious mess. You have people like John McCain out there who have their picture taken with al-Baghdadi, who was the self-proclaimed leader of the Caliphate of ISIS, and all these other really, really bad deals that are out there, and a lot of this evidence. And so they're trying to clean this up now, but they kind of left these guys out hanging to dry.
Can I ask you, what were your thoughts about? I just came across some news stuff when McCain just recently said some words, and Trump is saying some words about McCain saying some words. And then as I dig a little bit deeper, I find out about McCain's son dying, and then that the White House, the Trump White House, didn't send any condolences or any we're so sorry of your loss. Have you heard any of this?
From what I understand, that is not even true. That's all fake news.
Okay, because I came across that maybe about an hour and a half before the show, and I didn't want to get too deep into it, but it is interesting with this McCain and Trump going back and forth a little bit in there. Or no, I don't think McCain Twitters though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do know this. There's a lot of fake news out there. There was a fake Julian Assange thing that came out. Oh, hang on a second. I'm checking this out. John McCain's son. Now, this is from 2/16. Yeah, I don't see anything about his death. I'm not seeing that because be advised.
Good.
Okay, no, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because earlier today we ran across some information. We're like, what the heck? It was from Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. He put something out, and we're telling people, and it's like, stop, it's fake. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get in front of this narrative, because Hillary Clinton was in Europe, right? She's in Europe right now, and she really started when she found out that Julian Assange is about to put this information out that'll basically tag her and her husband and multiple people for treason and collusion with Russia and high crimes. She tried to really start to tag Julian Assange with Russia. He's a Russian operative. The stuff he puts out is not true. She's really pushing this. And then lo and behold, boom, early this morning, a fake Julian Assange thing comes out saying that they have all these documents on Barack Obama. And people start spreading this stuff around. And the reason they do this, why would someone do this? They're doing this so they're hoping it gets enough press, this fake news, so they can say, see, it's not even real. All this came out, it wasn't even real. So they can try to discredit the real news when it comes out, the real disclosure. So probably you're encountering this, and we're going to see a lot of this. This is coming up with this new moon, Uranus energetic also, Ney Sey, because there's going to be a lot of surprises and changes, and this fits kind of this deceptive type of Uranian energy that we're rolling into. It's going to be because remember, with Uranus and sudden changes, this warfare type energy, these surprises. One of the old sayings is the first casualty of a war is the truth. That's the first thing they got to control the narrative. So I think you're picking up on some of that, because I know I did earlier today. And everybody, I'm glad you did, and I'm glad I did, because people really need to check what they're looking at, because there's going to be a lot of disinformation out there in a big way.
Well, and also, like we were discussing at the beginning when I came into the show about, what I did with my child this weekend, when you look at things at these different perspectives, as you're saying, there's still joy in this world. There's still flowers blooming. There's still light, and you can find it if you're willing to look at it. And unfortunately, we've been conditioned to look more at the negativity than the positivity. And so it was kind of like I took Monday as a day to relax and breathe after all the kids. And then today I started dipping my toes again into the media and seeing what's going on in the world. And it just sometimes drags you down. And like we were saying earlier, the best way to disrupt a cycle is to add more cycles. And these continuous news cycles that get in there, and then you find yourself sitting in front of the computer for how long, trying to vet all of these news cycles. You know, when you're back to that 2/3 rule, it may be 2/3 the truth or 2/3 BS, but the rest of that third is going to just determine which way it runs.
Exactly. And you bring us full circle back to the thing I want to accentuate tonight. Number one, a heads up to everybody, because energetically, geopolitically, economically, we're going to get into something here. Will it be this week? It could be. Is that guaranteed? No way. Nothing's guaranteed. But there's a high degree of probability we're going to see it this week or week going into the weekend. And I just want everyone to be aware that when these things happen, it's not the end of the world. They are going to spin it up. And what Ney Sey's talking about, you have to disconnect from this stuff. When you see these things, no matter how bad it sounds, take a breath. Take a breath and step back and control the narrative yourself. Look around you. Realize where you are and who you are. And do not be controlled by this. I mean, this goes all the way back to Plato and the allegory of the cave, Plato's cave. And I talk about Plato's man cave. Now, the flickering images. The story of Plato's cave is where this allegory was that life is like a group of people who have been held captive in a cave. They're tied up, and they can only see in one direction and one wall of the cave. And behind them is a fire, and they can feel the heat from the fire. And in between them and the fire are people making noises with mask on, and their shadows are big, and ooh, blah, 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 blah. And all they can see, they can't see the people. They're just like them with the fake mask behind them. All they see is the image that's flickering on the wall of the cave in front of them, big and scary, and all these noises, oh, and they're controlled this way. Oh, do this, or this big is going to get you, booga, booga, booga. And what it is, it's all deception. It's the flickering images on the wall of the cave and nothing more, but people don't know. And it's very interesting. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it, because it goes into the further the psychological aspects of people who are released from the cave. And once they realize and see they're unbound, they see that they've been deceived this whole time, and they go out and they see it's light and beautiful. Some people are very happy, but some people are they can't handle it. And they kind of lose it, and they want to be back in the cave, which is weird in itself. But I encourage you to read it. But what I'm trying to say is the flickering images you see on the man cave wall of your TV. If you're watching television, you're on the internet, you're listening to the radio, do not be scared by it. I mean, let's go all the way back in the beginning when Ney Sey started talking this evening. He said Mockingbird. And I pointed out is about the Project Mockingbird of the CIA that they started back in the 50s. That never went away, people. Man, they control people with a narrative. I mean, Trump talks about fake news. They're always bringing up these fake stories and all this. They're trying to control people, and they do it big time with big energetic things. And, you know, just because something happens and they're trying to control you, they call them false flags, doesn't mean they're fake. Doesn't mean they're fake, because I tell you what, the people who are in charge of all this stuff and do these things, they have no qualms about bloodletting. As a matter of fact, it's almost ritualistic to them, and they do it. And the point I'm getting at is 2 points. Number one, be advised. We are coming up on an energetic here where we may see something act out in a big way that could cause fear in you. And number two, don't be afraid, no matter what you see or what's happening. And number three, be prepared for it. Be prepared for it, you know. Use your common sense. Be prepared. Have some supplies. some extra food, some extra water if you need them, if there's disruptions, because just think about how they could play this, because they got to get everybody's attention. Because that's the thing, Ney Sey. I mean, think about where you live out there in the middle of nowhere, right? A lot of people, if something big happens in New York or in California, I mean, the fires going on or attacks everywhere, you know, people are like, no, well, that's really bad, but it doesn't affect them. They're going to try to do something to catch the energetic of everybody. And to do that, they're going to have to be disruptive. And that disruption, the only way they can get everybody is, again, let's go back to the beginning of the program, brother. Disruption of the power grid. How were you describing it when I said, you know, we're all intertwined? Yes, it's that the power grid, it's the information sources. If they can disrupt that, even on a controlled manner, and make it seem like it was, you know, an attack or something, they'll get everybody's attention. Everybody's attention, because they want to try to control the narrative and put fear in everyone so they can control them, you know, with the big ooga booga shadows on the wall.
Well, and then think about it in the aspect of how they're constantly trying to give us technological pacifiers for that uneasiness that some people are feeling. And if this big old cutoff switch gets flipped, you know, what do you do now? Right now, this latest fad with children, they call them fidget spinners. Oh my God, they're driving me crazy, because I think it's increasing a child's anxiety. Because what happens when that child who's already impatient forgets his fidget spinner? Then it's going to be, you know, 3 times as worse, because you gave him this pacifier for the longest time. I mean, the beautiful thing of the fidget spinner is the technological advancement of it, and the whole thing of a bearing is phenomenon in itself. But it's just that whole thing, another pacifier. And the hole that we feel within ourselves can be easily filled with our own love.
You know, I'm going to tell you this. You've made, this is going to sound weird to you. Dude, I've heard people talk about those. I saw a picture of one because I was curious. I looked it up. I actually was at a store someplace, and I think I saw them for sale, but I have never seen a kid with one of those. I've never seen an adult with one. I've never seen somebody actually with one of those in their hand ever in my life.
I was just talking to a friend of mine who is a teacher here in the area, and their school banned them from class now because they're starting to.
What's a toy? I can see why they would ban them. It's like a toy.
Right, but the one of the claims of the whole toy is, you know, to help your kids with their anxiety and their impatientness.
Oh, wow, what a selling technique. Oh, great. Oh, your kids are bothering you? They're here, give them a shiny thing to distract them. Oh, yeah, how much are they? Like, you know, $5 or something?
Yes.
What a marketing tool, man.
Anywhere from $5 up to like $40-$50, dude. They get really spendy.
Why? How can they be so expensive?
They're turning into collector things now.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. So they're like the new Beanie Babies of
the new cycle. The new cycle.
Oh man, and it's nothing new. It's nothing new under the sun. I mean, you can go back. There are people. You're talking about the new cycle. There are people who have become wealthy collecting the collector's items from a long time ago, because the baseball cards and the different things they had, decades ago, are worth a lot of money. So, and I said the Beanie Babies, I guess they're worth money. What they have.
Do you remember, Phoenix, a stick and a wheel?
A stick?
Did you ever play with a stick and a wheel?
You're talking about like a hoop?
Yeah, a hoop.
Yeah. No, I know what they are. I've never played with one because they didn't have those when I was young.
Well, on the res, being poor, we just used. Well, I wasn't on the res, but visiting there, we would just use one of those old, thick, hard rubber bike tires and just a stick. And you look back at it and you're just like, oh my God, that's so ridiculous. But we were just talking about this weekend also. The skill that it took, where you use the stick to stand up the hoop, and then you started to try to roll it, and that was not an easy task.
Yeah, well, and it's also physical activity because kids would race with them, they would chase with them, and they would do all kinds of stuff. Yeah, there used to be all kinds of very simplistic things that kids played with. Jump ropes, when I was a kid, jump ropes, all the girls had jump ropes. Anyway, whoop.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are DFR, your protection from deception.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Whatever is going down, don't stop listening to me in Phoenix tonight. Unless, of course, I screwed up my mute button once again. So if I haven't, Phoenix would have interrupted me. So I think we're all good. But welcome back. And remember to play. I sometimes make the comment, I would rather never grow up and be a child acting like an adult than to ever be an adult acting like a child. What do you think, Phoenix?
Oh, you're 100% right. We have to. And it's vital to your health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health, to do things that are fun. To survive tumultuous times is one thing, but you have to thrive. You have to survive tumultuous times in a victorious manner. And you do this by being happy. And it's so important. We talk about preparation, supplies, and stuff. In my book, Have a Plan and Plan to Act, I actually have a section in there about play, about things. I mean, what could you get? Let's say the power went out. Do you have stuff to occupy yourself? Do you have books to read? Dude, you will not, well, of course you're blind, but you have audiobooks, but Braille, you can do the Braille thing. But, so many people don't have reading material. I actually have, and people laugh at me. My son used to laugh at me about this. I have some books that I want to read. I've been saving. And he's like, why are you saving books? I'm like, I really want to read this book, but, I hope I survive, live long enough to have the time to read it. Or if I'm in a situation where there's nothing else to do. Because, we were talking about how they have everybody occupied with electronics. And someday, if the grid goes down or the internet goes down, what are you going to do? And you can only read so much. And some people would be at a real far stretch to try to find something in their house to read. So I have a lot of literature and a lot I love to read. And some I'm just like saving, kind of like dessert. But, do you have cards? Do you have dice? Do you have toys, the old school toys for kids, and it's so important because, man, and we've talked about this before, the problem with kids today. I mean, they have special programs now. They're trying to get parents to make sure kids play for an hour. Really? To be outside for an hour, to do outside activities for an hour a day. Yeah, good luck keeping me in the house for an hour a day when I was a kid, man. That was a problem that parents had when I was a kid, was getting the kids inside, because nobody wanted to be inside. Everybody wanted to be outside, grabbing basketballs, grabbing footballs, grabbing baseballs, grabbing whatever, jumping on the bicycles, the hula hoops with the girls, or they had the batons, the jump ropes. And I mean, everybody had something going on. I mean, if you didn't have it, you made it. You made up a game. I mean, heck, that's where Kick the Can came from. I mean, it's just like, here, grab this old can, let's play, and we've lost that. And, as adults, we have to do things that you enjoy. I've talked about in the past people I've known of wealth, extreme wealth. And they, I've met two different classifications of people with who would you most people consider very wealthy. And one classification are the group that are absolutely miserable. I mean, nothing's right. Just they're not happy. Everything's wrong. There's always a problem, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have some that are happy and content. And what I have found through observation, that the ones who are happy and content, they usually have a hobby. And that hobby, 9 times out of 10, not all the time, but 9 times out of 10 is something simple. It's something that they enjoyed doing as a kid, like hiking or gardening or painting or playing music. Something simple. And the ones who were the happiest weren't the ones chasing, these very expensive hobbies all around the world. Some of the happiest ones were the ones who did things that anybody can do. Anybody. I don't care how much money or lack of money you have, you can do these things. And what it was, they found that their joy was something that they enjoyed as a child. And they would replicate it and do it like, I now have the time to do what I loved to do when I was a young man or a young woman. And they would do these simple things, and it brought joy and peace to their hearts. And we all have to do that. I encourage people every day to just disconnect, man. Turn it off. Just go outside. And I do it. I mean, before I come on the show, I always disconnect. I'll be like, reading the net, getting news and stuff during the day. But before I go on, man, I usually just turn it off and go out. Sometimes I run, walk, or just chill and just look at the horizon and do nothing. Just disconnect my mind. And everybody should do that every day.
Well, I like to sit and ponder and highly increase my intellect just before the show.
Yeah, by chewing on buffalo jerky and buffalo stew and all that, right?
Oh, don't do this to me, Phoenix. I have to pull back the reins on my eating habits lately. I have not been very nice to myself. A friend brought over some curry, homemade vegan curry, and it was just delicious. But it had red peppers and green peppers and tomatoes and potatoes, all of the nightshade family that if you have any kind of rheumatoid or joint things, nightshade is not a pleasant food for that condition. And I had, I think, 2.5 bowls of this curry and rice, but it was just so good. So I have to just be my rabbit food for the next few days to bring back the balance of things.
That's funny. Bringing back the balance. Okay, I'm talking about, before we go, because I told everyone to talk about this, the Kurdistan situation in Iraq. Now, people aren't familiar with this. There's basically 3 areas of Iraq, 3 different people groups. Kurdistan is the northern part of Iraq, the Kurdish people. And they have traditionally been at odds with Iraq primary. When Saddam Hussein was in power, he actually went after the Kurds and really kind of battled with them, did some nasty things. And they have been planning an independence drive for a long time, for 10 years, since the coalition went in there and took over Iraq. Oh man, what a mess. Anyway, so the Kurds, they want to do a referendum to become an independent state. They had their own flag, their own anthem, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're independent, different people. And they actually had one this year, September 25th. And according to the referendum, the vote, they voted to become their own independent state. Well, they tried that, but the nation of Iraq themselves went in just this week and overtook Kirkuk. Now, Kirkuk is an area of Kurdistan, and the reason the Iraqi military went in there is because it is the oil-rich area. That's where the oil fields are of northern Iraq that are extremely rich and wealthy. And the Iraqi government went in and seized all those from the nation of Kurdistan. And there wasn't any fighting. The Kurdish Peshmerga, which is their military, fled and didn't fight with the Iraqi military. But the United States government has taken a neutral stance, saying, oh, we don't back either group. BS. They originally were the ones promoting this. Biden used to call it three-state solution, and they wanted this. The United States, when they're still struggling for the petrodollar, the plan was to divide Iraq into three states, the three-state solution. Biden used to talk about it all the time. And that way, Kurdistan would have Kirkuk, which was one of the most oil-rich areas of Iraq. They'd have all that wealth. Plus, they would be allies of the United States and Israel, because Kirkuk and the Kurdish people are very in ally with Israel and the Israeli nation, which is bizarre to a lot of people. That's one reason why they had such odds with Saddam Hussein while they're in Iraq, being part of Iraq. But under Saddam Hussein, that was all suppressed. But they thought they were going to do this referendum and split away. Well, they have. They did the referendum. They split away. But guess what? All of their major wealth area, Kirkuk, has been reseized by Iraq. Now, there's a reason for that. The reason Iraq did that was because Iraq has gone through independently, not with the United States, but independently, made all kinds of deals over the past 5 years with Russia, with Iran, with China, for all these big economic deals for rebuilding and all this in exchange for Iraqi oil. And for those deals to be solid and standing, they need to have those oil fields of Kirkuk. And so that's what's going on with that. Where that will blossom into, I have no idea. But I'm just trying to explain a little bit of that craziness to everyone who's listening who may follow all of that. Because a lot of people are invested in assets of the Middle East and different things of the Middle East, and it all hinges around this oil. But again, dude, we were talking about this. This is just like the old whaling industry. We've talked about this back in the 17th and 18th century, 18th and 19th century, whale oil was used for lighting. If you went someplace at night and there was a light on, it was either one of two things. It was either a whale oil lamp or a candle, because kerosene and oil had not been discovered yet. And the whaling vessels that came up, out of the East Coast and other nations, they would hunt the great humpback whales and gray whales and get the oil, the whale oil that was in a huge reservoir near their head, and use this oil for all types of things, but primarily for lighting. And what happened was oil was discovered in Pennsylvania, is where the actual first oil rig was, and they determined and discovered how to make kerosene and use kerosene for an alternative to whale oil. And what that was the birth of the petroleum industry and the death of the whaling industry. And there was a lot of opposition to it. But I mean, millions and millions of dollars were made in the whaling industry. Fortunes were made, off whaling ships and whaling and all the products, the meat, the blubber, the oil, the bones and all these different things that were used from the whales. But the industry it went away. It just went away. and it was replaced by the oil industry. And we're at that juncture again, Ney Sey, where the petroleum industry is about to go away and it's going to be replaced by other things. Would you agree with that?
Cannabis. The easiest replacement, of course.
Yeah, that would be the easiest. Oh, speaking of, dude, I don't know if you have been following the fires in California and these really amazing fires they've been having. Over 5,000 homes destroyed. But one thing that was destroyed also were these big cannabis production facilities and marijuana growing facilities and fields outside and inside facilities. And it was actually speculated by Donald Trump today. He said he thought that possibly some of these fires were lighted by the Mexican drug cartels because of the California cannabis industry was really hitting hard into the drug cartels' illegal, importation of cannabis. And he thought that possibly some of it was drug cartel related because, man, not only did it hit Napa Valley and the grapes and wine production, but the cannabis production of California has been hit big time, billions of dollars.
I personally know people out there in that area that are claiming that this was intentionally set. But funny that Trump says that, because I would not be surprised if it was set by his little Nazi, I'm sorry, that's not nice, his drug czar right now, who is anti-cannabis.
That's true. But he is anti-cannabis, but I don't know. I don't think that is the case. I could see it more likely because follow the money. And because the pharmaceuticals are still, and the medical industry is making money off the cannabis industry in California because it goes through that type of regulation, through the dispensaries and all that, and the doctors profit from it. So it actually profits the pharmaceutical industry in California. So I think because of that
but all of the pharmaceuticals, they have their own private fields, and a lot of them aren't in California.
That's true.
I could jump online and probably send you the link of where, because they've been, the pharmaceutical company has had their fields for years. Probably, I would say, easily 25 years. Oh,
longer than that. Dude, the United States military has been growing cannabis for decades. Decades. They had, as a matter of fact, they used to grow during World War II. And people can research this. They had internment camps here in the United States where they had German and Japanese prisoners, and every internment camp had cannabis fields and gardens because they provided that as an alternative to tobacco, and sometimes with a tobacco mix to pacify all of the detainees.
Right. Yeah, cannabis. Don't get me going, Phoenix.
Too late.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, it is definitely going to affect. It is definitely going to affect the industry for sure. And when I first learned about it, the first thing that came into my head about the carpet bombing of the heroin fields in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I hope to see that. If they do not burn the poppy fields of Afghanistan and destroy them, that there's a total problem here, because they sent in an additional 5,000 people to Afghanistan, and he says he's going to sign legislation to fight the heroin problem. You want to fight the heroin problem? Burn down the darn poppy fields of Afghanistan. And we've talked about this multiple times, the U.S. troops that guard them, that are there, and they say they keep them for economic reasons for the local populace. Bull. If the Taliban could destroy them, which they did, and replace the fields with other agricultural crops, which they did, because they thought it was immoral, which they did, we can do the same. plant wheat, plant oats, plant anything, cotton. I don't know. There's got to be something compatible with cotton. That sounds probably a pretty good idea. And do something to do that and eradicate that stuff. If we don't see that, if we don't see big announcements of that, that's not a good thing, dude.
Yeah, well, it's just so frustrating that the thousands and thousands of veterans that are now addicts to opium because of this huge push of the OxyContins. And forgive me if this is ego and bringing me into it again, but just last month when I got my prescription for my opiates, they gave me 7 tablets for the month. A year ago, they had me taking over 120 milligrams of fast-acting, over 70 pills of long-lasting, and had me on it dronabinol at the same time. And if I was taking those amount of pills that they prescribed to me, I would be a drooling, babbling idiot. And just for everybody's knowledge, that if all of a sudden in the next few weeks, if I am not heard from again and you find out that I am in the psych ward of the VA, just know that I am about to go into battle again with the VA system.
Okay. Well, thanks for the heads up on that. What do you think battle for them? I mean,
well, they took away all of my pain management because they tested me for cannabis, and I tested positive for THC. Well, I was on dronabinol, which is synthetic THC. And so because I was able to cut my opiate use faster because I wanted to get off the opiates, I was able to cut myself rather quickly off all the opiates. So I can't confirm nor deny I may or may not have my emergency supply just in case stash of opiates. But then when they cut me off the dronabinol, I continued to test positive for THC because I continued to use the dronabinol. And I can't confirm nor deny the absolute true Mother Nature's product of cannabis and not synthetic. So they took me off of all of my pain medication and didn't give me anything to replace it.
Wow. Dude, okay. Well, man, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know what, though? Running out of time, we have 4 minutes left. I want to say to everybody, though, just a recap of what we've been talking about. Heads up for this week on Thursday with this new moon and the fact that North Korea is rattling sabers again, threatening to launch missiles because the United States and South Korea are there with a massive war game and like shaking sabers in their face. And we're coming up on this Uranus strong opposition with this new moon, which creates sudden surprises, shocks, changes. And they need a cover story because Julian Assange of WikiLeaks is about to drop the bombshell. And I saw during the break even more info coming out about Abedin's computer and all this stuff. They have so much corruption, so much government corruption on so many people that they're ready to drop the bomb on, that these people will do anything to make that story go away. And plus, add in the economic story. What I'm trying to tell everyone is be advised. We may see some shocking things, and do not be fearful of these. Stay centered, disconnect from the info, and have a plan to act, and be sure and check your preps. Make sure there's some extra food, some extra cash on hand, water, medications, whatever you may need if there's some type of disruptions, because they are going to try to potentially disrupt everybody to get everybody in fear, even those in outlying areas who would normally say, I can't see it from my house. Because if they turn the power off and the internet, guess what? And the ATM doesn't work, you can see it from your house. So anyway, don't be fearful of this stuff. Just be prepared. How was that? Did I sum that up pretty good?
Absolutely. And remember to play like a child and find your stick in your hoop.
Find your stick in your hoop. Oh man. I tell you what, that is so true. Find your own inner child again. Every day, do something. Disconnect, man. So many people get just like deer in the headlights, on the internet or their phone, especially the phones, social media and all that. Just kind of disconnect from that and look at a far horizon. When was the last time you were outside, looked at a tree, or walked barefoot on the grass, or enjoyed just God's scenery?
All we ask is that you don't disconnect during our shows.
Exactly. Oh man, make sure you have your solar backup, this backup, that backup. Now, just think about this stuff. Again, not to be fearful to people or spread doom. Just awareness. We're trying to make you aware of these things because knowledge is power. And you equip yourself with this knowledge and you think, hey, wait a minute. Potentially there might be some surprises coming up this week. Maybe, maybe not. But if they are, guess what? And you listen to this program, you won't be surprised. You'll be like, oh, yeah, we knew this was coming. And you'll be ready for it.
Well, thank you all again. And hello to the chat room. We didn't say a single thing to them, but we know you're out there, and thank you for being there.
Yeah, we know you're out there. Yeah, now, everyone be sure and come back on Thursday. We will have Bob Gilpatrick of Boomers Forever Young will be joining us. And what Bob is going to be talking about specifically this Thursday, I'm really not sure. Hey, man, have you talked to Bob yet?
No, and I was going to talk to you off air about that. I possibly might be with you on Thursday. We'll see what is coming on the reservation.
Okay, well, let me know because that'd be cool. That way you could talk directly to Bob. He was expecting you last time, and you weren't able to make it, but that's okay. But anyway, for everybody else, Bob Gilpatrick of Boomers Forever Young, be sure and tune in because, man, the guy's a wealth of knowledge. He's a professional individual with a fantastic company based out of St. Petersburg, Florida, that has a record of fantastic success with all of the products. And again, be sure and tune in because he is a wealth of knowledge. Ney Sey, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm glad your daughter's party came out well and everything. So let me know, man, if you can join us on Thursday.
You bet. And we found out that Tinkerbell did not die during the party. It was all a hoax.
Again, fascinating yet creepy.
Toodles, everybody.
All right. See you, brother. Oh, man, that's it, people. Find someone you love. Tell them that you love them. And say no to fear. We'll be back on Thursday.